The wind had teeth that night. It scraped through the narrow streets of Haven Ridge, slipping under coats and cutting across the cracked glass of the old bus shelter at the edge of town. There she stood, alone, still, Margaret Hale, silver-haired and small, clutching a worn canvas bag to her chest. Her eyes scanned the road again and again, though nothing had come for hours. Her voice, barely above a whisper, repeated the same question into the cold. Is the number 7 bus coming soon? I just need to get home. People passed her like she wasn't there. A man in a suit glanced, then looked away. A young couple pulled their coats tighter and crossed the street. The shelter was old, rusted, forgotten, like the woman inside it, until someone stopped. Noah Bennett, 18, skin dark from the sun, hands calloused from work. A delivery bike leaned beside him, his last order of the day sitting in a torn food bag. If he made it on time, he could pay his rent. If not, he'd sleep outside. He should have kept going. But he looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, something inside him said, if I don't help her, who will? He took a breath, turned his handlebars, and changed the course of 2 lives forever. Watch until the very end, because sometimes one small choice can rewrite everything. Subscribe for more real stories that matter. Comment if you've ever helped someone, and it came back to you in a way you didn't expect. Noah Bennett didn't talk much. He didn't need to. People filled silence with assumptions anyway. Some thought he was just another delivery kid who couldn't land a real job. Others thought he was in trouble, too quiet, too observant, too distant. No one asked where he went at night, or why he always carried his backpack even when it was empty. But if they'd asked, they would have learned something simple. Noah noticed everything. He lived in a room the size of a storage closet behind a discount furniture store. The landlord, a bitter man named Craig, gave him a week-to-week lease. If the rent wasn't in by Friday night, the lock changed on Saturday morning. No exceptions. Noah didn't complain. He'd lived through worse. After losing both parents at 11, mother to illness, father to a wrong turn on an icy road, he bounced through the system. Group homes. Couch hopping. At 14, he stopped expecting someone to show up for him. He worked jobs that paid cash and asked no questions. At 17, he bought a second-hand delivery bike with the last of his savings. Not because he wanted to ride, but because it meant he could move. Fast, quiet, without waiting on anyone. And now, at 18, that same bike paid for everything he had. His room, his food, the second-hand hoodie he wore like armor. He didn't dream big. He just wanted to survive the week. Noah had a routine. Wake at 6, ride by 7, deliver until 9, sleep by midnight after logging the day's earnings in a spiral notebook. Every dollar counted. Every minute mattered. He didn't waste time. He didn't waste trust. And yet, there were signs of something different in him. A softness he didn't show, but couldn't shake. He left extra napkins and food bags for customers with kids. He helped a local shopkeeper, Mr. Harold, sweep the sidewalk before opening. And once a week, he dropped a sandwich near the alley where an old man named Gus slept without ever being seen. Noah didn't call it kindness. He called it balance, because the world had taken from him. But that didn't mean he had to take from others. Still, Noah had edges. He moved with purpose, fast but not frantic. He listened more than he spoke. People thought he was cold, but what they didn't see was that Noah remembered everything. Every time someone looked through him. Every night someone said, "I'll be back," and wasn't. Every moment he needed help and got silence instead. So he built walls. Not with anger, with focus. He protected his time, his heart, his hope, because in his world, hope was expensive, and he couldn't afford to lose it. On the night he met Margaret Hale, he was cutting it close. His last delivery was 4 neighborhoods over, for a customer who always tipped just enough to matter. He needed that tip. Rent was due the next morning. He'd already been late twice. One more, and Craig wouldn't just evict him. He'd throw everything out onto the street and lock the door behind him. Noah knew that feeling too well, so he planned his route to the second. No detours, no delays, until he passed the old bus shelter on 6th and Rowan, and saw her. At first, he kept riding. He was a minute late already. Then he slowed. He didn't know why. Maybe it was her face, or the way her coat barely clung to her frail shoulders. Or maybe it was the fact that she was still asking, in that thin, crackling voice, "Has the number 7 bus come yet? I just need to get home." The same line, over and over. People passed. No one answered. Noah stopped, pulled a wide circle, then came back, parked his bike, stood silently for a moment. She didn't even notice him at first. Then he stepped closer. "Ma'am." She turned slowly, as if unsure the voice was real. "Yes. Are you waiting for someone?" She blinked. "The bus. Number 7. I think it's late, but it's coming, right? I just need to get home." Her words were soft, repeated, not quite tethered to the present. Noah knew that look, the disorientation, the loops, the fear behind it all. He'd seen it before, in the last months of his mother's life, when the pain meds made time melt. His chest tightened. He looked down the street. No bus. Just cold. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "We'll get you home," he said quietly. "I promise." He could have called someone, could have flagged a patrol car, could have walked away, but he didn't. He asked her name. She said Margaret, then said June, then said Margaret again. He asked if she had a phone. She didn't. He asked if she remembered an address. She mumbled numbers. Birch Street. Or was it Birch Lane? He pieced together what he could. Recalled a delivery from 2 weeks back. A large house in Forest Hill, with a gated entry and a caretaker who wore white gloves. The name on the receipt had been Hale. He took a guess. Does Forest Hill sound familiar? Her eyes flickered. Softly. "That's where my garden is." It was enough. He helped her onto the bike's rear rack, adjusted the seat, and steadied her small frame with bungee cords and a borrowed blanket from a nearby stoop. Then he pedaled. It took over 2 hours. His legs burned. The wind cut sharper as they climbed the hill. But she didn't complain once. She just whispered about birds, about her daughter who played piano, about a husband she hadn't seen in years. "He's working late tonight, but he'll be home soon." Noah listened, didn't correct her, didn't interrupt, just rode, steady, focused, not on the pain in his knees, not on the money he was losing, just on getting her home. When they reached the gate, it was open. A man in uniform stood at the drive, pacing frantic. When he saw them, his face dropped in relief. "Mrs. Hale," he cried, "we've been looking everywhere." Noah gently helped her down. She was at a bus stop, he explained. Kept asking for number 7. The man, Francis, the caretaker, looked at Noah with disbelief and gratitude. She's not supposed to leave alone. She just wandered off. He turned to Margaret, kneeling. "You're safe now, ma'am." She looked at him, unsure. Then at Noah. Then back again. Then she smiled. "I knew someone would come." Francis turned to Noah. "Please, come in. You must be freezing." Noah shook his head. "I have to get back." "At least take something." Noah pulled a slip of paper from his back pocket, scribbled his name and number, in case she needs anything. Then he turned, got on his bike, and pedaled back into the dark. When he reached his building, the lights were off. His things were outside. The door had a note on it. Locked. Overdue. He stood for a moment. Didn't curse. Didn't cry. Just picked up what he could. Then rode to the only place left. Mr. Harold's shop. The lights were off, but Noah knew where the spare key was hidden. He entered through the back, found the storeroom, laid his jacket on the cold floor, and slept. Not angry, just tired, but somewhere deep inside, still sure. He did the right thing, even if it cost him everything. The sun rose slow and pale over Forest Hill. Light bled into the corners of Margaret Hale's bedroom as birdsong tiptoed through the window curtains. The room was warm, quiet, soft pastels, a vase of dried lavender, and a photo frame turned slightly off-center on the nightstand. For a moment, all was still. Then Margaret stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, like waking from a dream she didn't want to end. Her body felt heavy but safe. Her hands were still curled around the fabric of a jacket that didn't belong to her, rough denim, frayed at the sleeves. It took her a moment to remember. The bench, the cold, the boy. And then it hit her, not all at once, but like light filtering through a dirty window. She sat up straighter, pressed her palm to her forehead. His name, she whispered. Noah. She turned to the nightstand, and there it was, a small piece of paper, creased, folded in half. Noah B. 555-014-2722. If you ever need help again. Tears pressed into the corners of her eyes. He could have left me there. He could have walked away. But he didn't. She rang the bell beside her bed. Moments later, Francis stepped in. She didn't wait. Find him. Francis blinked. Excuse me. The boy. The one who brought me home. His name is Noah Bennett. He gave me this. She held out the note. Francis looked at it. Ma'am, are you sure? I want to thank him. I want to see him. Francis paused, then nodded. I'll go now. Across town, Noah was folding his jacket into a makeshift pillow against the storeroom wall of Mr. Harold's grocery. He hadn't slept much. The cold had a way of peeling through your skin, no matter how many layers you had on. Still, he didn't regret a thing. He'd done what was right. That was the deal he made with himself years ago. Do what's right, even if it costs you. And this time it did. No place to sleep. No delivery payment. No tip. Just one quiet sentence from a woman who probably wouldn't even remember. I knew someone would come. It was enough. Almost. The sound of footsteps outside jolted him upright. The storeroom door creaked open. Mr. Harold stood there, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. You're up early, he said. Didn't really sleep. Noah replied. Harold handed him one of the cups. You could have called. You know the code. I didn't want to be a burden. Harold scoffed. Kid, I've had grown men steal detergent from aisle 5. You just needed warmth. That's not a burden. Noah nodded. Thanks. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Harold asked, You gonna tell me what happened? Noah hesitated. Then, quietly, I met someone. An old lady. She was lost. I brought her home. Harold raised an eyebrow. You skipped your shift for that? I skipped my life for that. Harold nodded slowly. You do it again? In a second. A beat. Then Harold said, You're better than most of us. Just then, a sleek black car pulled up outside the grocery. The engine idled for a few seconds before the driver, Francis, stepped out, buttoning his coat. He looked out of place on this side of town. Noah spotted him through the frosted front window. I think someone's looking for you, Harold said. Noah stood, heart in his throat. Francis entered the shop. He walked straight toward Noah. You Noah Bennett? Yes. Francis extended a hand. I'm Francis. I work for Mrs. Margaret Hale. She asked me to find you. She remembers everything. Noah blinked. I thought she might not. She does. She wants to see you. Today, if you're willing. Noah looked at Harold. Harold grinned. Go. Back at the Hale estate, the mood was different. Not formal. Not stiff. Just waiting. Margaret sat in a sunlit drawing room, wearing a pale blue sweater and slippers. Her hair was neatly pinned, and on the table beside her were 2 mugs, one for tea, the other empty, waiting. When the door opened and Noah stepped inside, she looked up and smiled. Hello, dear. Noah hesitated. Do you remember me? She nodded. You brought me home, when no one else would. I may be old, but I remember grace when I feel it. He stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Francis gently nudged him forward. Come sit. Noah sat. Margaret studied him for a moment. You remind me of my grandson. Noah looked down. I don't have grandparents. You do now, she said gently. He laughed awkwardly. I didn't help you for anything in return. I know. That's why it matters, she replied. They talked for an hour. About nothing. About everything. About the trinkets on her shelf. The garden she used to tend. The way her mind sometimes slipped and circled back. She spoke slowly, carefully. but every word carried clarity. "I've spent a long time in a house full of rooms," she said, "but none of them had what you brought in last night." "What's that?" "Human decency. Unpaid, unasked, uncomplicated." She took a slow breath. "Noah, I'd like you to stay here." His eyes widened. "I what?" "Not forever. Not if you don't want to. But I have space. And I have a feeling you haven't had much of that lately." He didn't answer. So she added, "You helped me when I couldn't give you anything. That's the kind of person I want near me." Noah swallowed hard. "I'm not looking for handouts." "This isn't charity," she said. "It's gratitude. And maybe redemption. For both of us." That night, Noah stayed for dinner. Not because he said yes, but because no one asked him to leave. And when Margaret insisted he take the guest room, just for tonight, he didn't fight. He slept under a real quilt, with a real mattress beneath him. And for the first time in months, he didn't wake up cold. The next morning, he stepped into the garden behind the house. It was wild, overgrown, forgotten. Margaret stood at the edge, watching him. "I used to plant daffodils here," she said. "They don't come back anymore." Noah bent down, pulled a weed, then said, "Maybe they just need someone to believe in them again." She smiled, and so it began. Noah had never slept in silence before. Real silence. Not the hum of a street light or the hiss of broken plumbing, but the kind of silence where even the wind outside knew to stay gentle. He woke with the scent of fresh linen in his lungs, a ceiling painted soft white above him, and light slanting in through long, heavy curtains. For a moment he didn't move, because for a moment he forgot where he was. And when it came rushing back, the house, the woman, the garden, the offer, he sat up slowly, like something sacred had been placed in his chest, and he didn't want to drop it. Downstairs, the kettle was already boiling. Margaret sat at the breakfast table reading a book. Francis, as always, stood just far enough to be polite and just close enough to be present. Noah joined her, and for the first time in years, someone passed him a full plate without asking for anything in return. "You slept well," Margaret said. "I did," he replied. "No dreams." He paused. "Only one. I was inside a house, and no one asked me to leave." She smiled. Then, maybe it wasn't a dream. By the end of the week, Noah had fixed the back gate, trimmed the hedges, helped Francis organize the storage room, and made breakfast for the whole household twice. He hadn't agreed to stay, but he hadn't left either, because leaving something that felt safe wasn't easy when safe had never felt real before. Margaret didn't pressure him. She just made space. Francis didn't interrogate him. He just handed him tools. And for the first time since he was 11, Noah wasn't surviving minute to minute. He was breathing. He was beginning to feel human again. But systems don't like it when the invisible become visible. And someone noticed. It started small. The landlord, Craig, showed up at Harold's store grumbling. Saw that boy loading a crate into some fancy car up near Forest Hill. Harold blinked, and thought he was broke. Harold folded his arms. He still is. What's your point? Craig shrugged. Just funny how quick people switch lanes. That was all. Just a spark. But gossip in small towns moves faster than fire. The next incident was subtler. A social worker showed up at the store, claimed to be doing routine outreach on minors who had aged out of foster care but hadn't declared a permanent residence. Harold, suspicious, played dumb. "I haven't seen him in weeks," he lied. The woman didn't believe him, didn't say anything, just jotted something in her notebook and walked out. Harold called Noah that night. "Be careful. You've stirred something." The next day, a letter arrived at the Hale residence. Typed, official, from the town's administrative office. It requested a clarification of Noah Bennett's legal employment and residential status. It cited outdated zoning codes and permits for unlicensed domestic residency. Francis read it aloud, brow furrowed. Margaret listened, then laughed softly. "They've never liked it when I do things my way." Francis looked at Noah. "You want me to take care of it?" Noah shook his head. "I'll go down there myself." The town clerk's office smelled like dust and rules. The woman behind the counter didn't look up when he approached. Nameplate, C. Milner. I'm here about the letter you sent Mrs. Hale, Noah said. Now she looked up. Her eyes scanned him the way a scanner scans a barcode. You are Noah Bennett. She nodded like she'd been expecting him. Do you have legal identification? He handed her his ID. She inspected it like it might explode. Do you have proof of address? I'm staying with Mrs. Hale. Temporarily? He hesitated. Indefinitely. She raised an eyebrow. Have you filed a residential transfer? I wasn't aware I needed to. She tapped a few keys on her computer. According to our system, you have no income on record, no formal lease, and no employment tax filings. I work informally. That still work. He said nothing. She folded her hands. I'll need to refer this to our Housing and Minor Services Division. I'm 18. Still falls under review. Review for what? She smiled. We just want to make sure everything's legitimate. He left the building feeling like he'd just been gently strangled. They hadn't said he was doing anything wrong, but they'd implied everything about him didn't belong. That night, he didn't sleep. Not because the bed wasn't warm, but because the air had changed. The house didn't feel unsafe, but the world outside it had begun to press inward again, like hands trying to push him back into the margins. In the morning, he found Margaret in the garden. She was planting again. Her hands were deep in soil. He knelt beside her, told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said, They don't question you because they think you're dangerous. They question you because you remind them how little they've done with what they have. He nodded, then asked, Should I leave? She paused, then looked at him, her voice quiet but unshakable. If you leave because you're scared, they win. But if you stay and live well, they disappear. So he stayed, but he became cautious. He made sure to carry ID at all times. He documented everything, every repair he made to the house, every job Francis gave him, every errand he ran. He kept receipts, not for payment, but for proof, because he knew what was coming next. And he was right. 2 weeks later, the town filed a complaint. Formal, public. It accused the Hale household of unauthorized guardianship and potential sheltering of a non-relative minor without due process. Francis was furious. They want a court date. Margaret stayed calm. Let them have it. Noah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't caused this. But now he was at the center of it, because he'd done what no one else had. He'd helped someone without asking what was in it for him. The line had been crossed. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about making sure people like him knew their place. About reminding him that kindness without paperwork was rebellion. About reminding her that giving shelter without permission was a challenge to order. But neither of them bowed, because they had something stronger than permission. They had each other. And for the first time in his life, Noah realized, doing the right thing doesn't always make the world kinder, but it does make you unbreakable. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No gavel, no crowd, no echoing wood panels or big legal speeches. Just 4 folding chairs, a clerk with a clipboard, and a white-painted municipal room with flickering fluorescent lights and a faint smell of reheated coffee. This wasn't a trial. It was a formality. A hearing to determine whether Noah Bennett had the right to continue living at Margaret Hale's residence. The letter had called it a guardianship clarification inquiry, but everyone in the room knew what it really was. A warning, a leash, a quiet attempt to push him back where he belonged, out of sight, off the grid, unrecognized. Margaret wanted to attend. Noah told her no. I'll handle it, but they'll question you. He nodded. Let them. Francis drove him there in silence. When they arrived, the clerk asked if he had legal representation. He held up his ID. This is all I've got. They began with questions that sounded polite, but carried knives underneath. How long have you been living at the Hale residence? What is the nature of your relationship to Mrs. Hale? Have you accepted any form of compensation for labor performed on the property? Do you consider yourself a dependent or an employee? Each question tried to corner him, put him in a box: orphan, squatter, undocumented worker, unwanted guest. Noah answered calmly. 2 months. She asked me to stay. I didn't ask for anything. I fixed her gate because it was broken. No, I don't consider myself anything. Just present. The clerk frowned. You realize your presence there could be construed as inappropriate. He raised an eyebrow. Inappropriate how? She's a vulnerable adult. You're not family. There are safeguards. She wandered into the cold alone. Noah interrupted. I didn't see any safeguards then. The room went quiet. The woman in the corner, from social services, leaned forward. You're clearly intelligent. You clearly care. Why didn't you apply for a formal program? A shelter? Transitional housing? He looked at her, unflinching. Because I was tired of asking for permission to survive. That sentence changed the temperature of the room. The clerk shifted. The note-taker looked up. But Noah wasn't done. He sat forward, both hands on the table now. Voice calm. Even. You want me to prove I'm not using her? I can do that. You want to know how many hours I've worked on her property? I wrote them down. You want to know where I sleep? I can show you the sheets I wash. You want to know what I earn? 0. You want to know what I've gained? 1 warm meal a day, a place to breathe, and someone who says good morning like it means something. You think that's suspicious? Then maybe you're not protecting people. You're punishing them for being kind. Silence. The clerk looked stunned. The social services rep blinked slowly. Frances, standing in the back of the room, gave the faintest nod. The note-taker, a young woman with a nervous expression, cleared her throat. I'm sorry. But what did you mean when you said you've written everything down? Noah reached into his bag, pulled out a thick, dog-eared notebook, slammed it on the table. Page after page. Every hour of work. Every detail. Water heater checked. Gate repaired. Gutter cleared. Groceries carried. Light bulbs changed. Conversations had. Dated. Labeled. Organized. And at the very end, a handwritten quote from Margaret. You gave me back something no one noticed was gone, dignity. The woman swallowed hard. The clerk leaned in. These are detailed. Noah looked at him. Because I knew you'd come eventually. The clerk shifted in his seat. You understand we have to follow protocol. Noah cut in. No, what you're doing isn't protocol. It's deterrence. You want people like me to feel like help is dangerous. You want people like her to think giving shelter is risky. You want this whole thing to feel so complicated. No one tries again. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried. It settled in the corners of the room like dust that wouldn't sweep away. The social services rep sat back, exhaling slowly. She looked at him differently now. Not as a case, not as a risk, but as a mirror of everything the system had forgotten how to be. I'm going to recommend withdrawal of the complaint, she said quietly. The clerk blinked. But we haven't. You heard him. She turned to Noah, and I believe her. Then to the room. She knew exactly what she was doing when she opened her door. The room emptied slowly. The clerk looked deflated. Frances clapped Noah gently on the back as they stepped into the hallway. You just made a room full of people feel very small, he said. Noah didn't smile. I didn't do it to win. I know. He paused. You said everything that needed to be said. Noah shook his head. Not everything. Frances raised an eyebrow. There's one thing left. That evening, they returned to the Hale residence. Margaret was waiting on the porch, bundled in her shawl. As soon as Noah stepped out of the car, she rose to her feet. Did they listen? He nodded. She exhaled. Good. He walked up the steps, met her eyes, and finally said it. You saved me. And I didn't want to admit it because I didn't want to owe anyone anything. But this isn't debt. It's family. She took his hand. Noah, she said softly, family isn't who you owe. It's who you choose to walk beside. He nodded, and for the first time, ever, he felt it land. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't a case. He wasn't a stranger who'd done a good deed. He was home. And the woman who'd once stood in the cold, forgotten by everyone, now sat beside the boy the world tried to erase. And together, they were rewriting what it meant to be safe. Not with paperwork, but with truth. That night, Margaret placed his notebook, the one with every recorded act of care, on the mantel. She didn't say anything, didn't ask permission. She just placed it there, right next to the family photos, because that's what it was now. Proof of a life that mattered. At first, nothing changed. No parades, no applause, no articles. The complaint was dropped. The case was closed. Noah stayed, and the world went quiet again. But it was a different quiet, not the cold kind that ignores, the watchful kind, because some people had listened, and they hadn't forgotten. It began with a whisper. A retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Ellis, who tutored part-time at the community center, stopped by the Hale estate to drop off some old books Margaret had donated years ago. She saw Noah in the garden, sleeves rolled up, fixing the irrigation system with a wrench and a row of salvaged parts. She paused, watching the way he moved, efficient, silent, gentle. He nodded at her. She nodded back. 2 days later, she mentioned him during a local committee meeting. He's the kind of young man we always say we need more of, and then ignore when we see him. One of the members who worked in community outreach wrote his name down. Nothing official, just a note. But that's how fire starts, one spark at a time. Then came the video. Francis filmed it, not on purpose, just as documentation. He often recorded projects Noah completed for maintenance records. This one was a time-lapse of Noah repairing the front steps. 3 hours, edited down to 60 seconds. At the end of the clip, Noah helped Margaret step onto the new stones. She smiled. He didn't notice the camera. Francis uploaded it to a shared cloud folder used by the estate staff. One of them, the gardener's niece, downloaded it and posted it on a local Facebook group with the caption, "He doesn't do this for praise, but I think someone should know." It was shared 200 times, then 2,000. Then it landed on a community blog called Everyday Giants, stories about quiet kindnesses. They wrote a short post. A boy named Noah fixed a staircase, but what he's really rebuilding is belief. The story didn't go viral, but it spread, in the kind of circles that matter. Educators, counselors, former foster kids, local nonprofits, people who knew what it meant when someone showed up without being asked. Soon calls started coming in. First, a small rehab clinic, then a youth support group, then a local high school principal who wanted to know if Noah would be willing to speak to his graduating class. Noah said no. He wasn't interested in speeches. He kept showing up in the garden, at the hardware store, in the kitchen beside Margaret, learning her recipes. But the requests didn't stop, because while he stayed quiet, the evidence spoke louder. Then came the article, written by someone Noah had never met, a social worker named Lisa Connors. She had sat silently in the back of the guardianship inquiry hearing, observing. She had been in the room when he laid down the notebook. She hadn't said a word then, but she had written every one of his words down afterward. Her article was titled, "The Boy with Receipts, When Kindness Outsmarts the System." She described his poise, his quiet clarity, the way he'd kept records, not to prove his worth, but to protect his right to be good. She quoted him directly. "I was tired of asking for permission to survive." That quote was reshared on 3 platforms, then 10, then nationwide on a teacher resource forum. It hit something raw, something real, because everyone knew a kid like Noah, or wished they had. Margaret read the article in the sunroom. She didn't cry. She just folded the page and placed it in a frame, next to the family photo of her late husband. That night, she said to Noah, "You gave the world a receipt it didn't know it owed." He just shrugged. "I gave it what I had." She nodded, and that's why it matters. 3 days later, someone knocked on the Hale estate's gate. It was a young man, early 30s, wearing a lanyard and a sheepish smile. His name was Isaiah. He ran a local mentorship program for youth who'd aged out of the foster care system. He'd read the article, watched the video, asked around, And then, finally, he just came. "I'm not here for a story," he told Noah. "I'm here because the kids I work with don't believe people like you exist." Noah looked at him, unsure how to respond. Isaiah added, "Would you come meet them? Not to inspire, just to be seen." Noah said he'd think about it. The next day, he showed up at the center. He didn't give a speech. He helped someone patch a wall. That was enough. Evidence doesn't always look like numbers. Sometimes it looks like a doorframe you repaired, a bag of groceries on a counter, a notebook filled with the kind of detail most people think is too small to track. But that proves you paid attention. That was the kind of evidence Noah left everywhere, and eventually couldn't be ignored. Harold, the grocery store owner who let him sleep in the storeroom that night, called him one evening. "You made the front page." Noah blinked. "Of what?" "The Haven Ridge Post. Sunday section. Human interest." Noah sighed. "They said they weren't going to run anything." Harold laughed. "Yeah, and I say I don't eat sugar, but my pantry tells a different story." He added, "They didn't run it for clicks. They ran it because the editor's mom saw that staircase video and cried." Noah didn't like the attention, but he didn't run from it either. He just kept doing what he always did. He showed up, and now other people showed up too. Volunteers came to the house asking if they could help with the garden. A carpenter dropped off tools he said he didn't need anymore. A local college offered Noah a scholarship, not because he asked, but because they couldn't justify not offering. He didn't take it, but he kept the letter, taped it to the inside of his notebook, as proof. Not that he was smart, not that he was valuable, but that evidence changes things, even when no one wants it to. Margaret once asked him, after reading yet another thank you letter, "Why do you think this is happening now?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because the world is full of people who did the right thing and were never believed, and now they're seeing someone who kept the receipts." He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to be safe. But the line between the two blurred more every day. Because when you do what's right long enough, and quietly enough, and consistently enough, someone's going to notice. And when they do, the power starts to shift. They tried to erase him, but now his work was in the system. Literally, his notes were being used in a community training pilot. His maintenance logs were circulated as a case study on informal support systems. And that single quote, "I was tired of asking for permission to survive," ended up printed on the wall of a halfway house bathroom in bold black marker. Anonymous, but real, because truth spreads faster than doubt when it's documented. That was the week Margaret said something she'd never said before. At dinner, with only the clink of silverware between them, she looked up and said, "You know, I think I'm alive because you found me." Noah didn't look up, but his voice was steady. "No," he said, "I think you're alive because you kept hoping someone would." It didn't happen all at once. Not like a door slamming or a siren wailing. It started in the way these things always do. Quiet, careful, calculated. With doubt. Not the kind you shout, the kind you plant. The first attack didn't even mention his name. A short op-ed in the Haven Ridge Weekly. "We celebrate kindness, but should it come without credentials?" The author was anonymous. The timing was precise. 2 days after the youth mentorship group publicly credited Noah for helping 3 teens re-enroll in school. The article didn't accuse. It questioned. Subtle phrases like vigilante volunteering and unlicensed influence floated like poison through the paragraph breaks. It ended with a warning. Intentions are not safeguards. The vulnerable deserve more than goodwill. They deserve standards. Margaret read it over tea. Francis read it twice, then crushed the paper in his hand. Noah said nothing. He folded the page, placed it in his notebook, and kept working on the back fence. When asked later why he saved it, he replied, "Because people forget who started the fire after the smoke clears." The second strike came sharper. A woman named Darla Winters, consultant in a nearby rehabilitation center, publicly criticized Noah in a town hall meeting. She didn't use slurs. She used slides, charts, phrases like improper methods and risk exposure. She claimed one of the teens he'd mentored had shown signs of regression. When pressed, she wouldn't say who. When challenged, she said it was confidential. The audience nodded. Some even clapped. She ended with a phrase Noah would never forget. "We cannot allow good intentions to replace qualified intervention. This is how abuse happens, slowly, subtly, behind smiles." It was surgical. A perfect mix of condescension and plausible concern. And it worked. For a while. Within a week, one local nonprofit pulled their name from a pilot program Noah had helped design. A city council meeting removed a vote on funding his garden outreach initiative. A guidance counselor emailed Margaret asking if Noah had official youth training certification. He didn't. Of course he didn't. He had results. But results weren't enough when they didn't come from the right people. Then came the edited footage. It started on a parent forum. A video clip of Noah showing a young girl how to stretch her arms during a therapy-like activity. The original moment was soft, caring. The child was laughing. But the clip was trimmed to remove the smile. The context. The consent. It looked questionable. The caption read, "This is who people are trusting with their kids." Noah saw it at midnight. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the clip had spread. Margaret's phone rang off the hook. The estate received emails, some supportive, others laced with suspicion. Francis took calls for hours. Noah said nothing. He sat in the garden, staring at the vines he'd helped climb back to life. Margaret came out and sat beside him. "You're angry," she said. He shook his head. "I'm used to being erased. I'm just not used to being twisted." She laid a hand on his shoulder. "They can't rewrite what happened." "No," he said, "but they can flood it with enough noise that no one hears it." Then came the knock. 2 representatives from the County Youth Oversight Office. Polite, professional. One carried a clipboard. The other wore a tight smile. "We're here to ask a few questions regarding Mr. Bennett's interactions with minors in community spaces." Francis asked for a warrant. They didn't have one. "We just want to verify some concerns," one said. "We've received anonymous reports," said the other. Francis turned to Noah. Noah stepped forward. "You want to know what I've done?" he said. "I kept kids from quitting school. I gave them tools. I told them they mattered. I gave rides. I made sandwiches. I walked them home. That's it." The first rep tilted her head. "Why them? Why you?" "Because no one else was doing it," he replied. "And what qualifies you to?" "Nothing," he said. "Nothing but the fact that I didn't walk away." They didn't have answers for that, but they left a report form and a warning. "If any future complaint becomes formal, we'll have to intervene." The next day, Margaret found Noah in the tool shed, sorting screws by hand. He didn't look up. She stood in the doorway. "They want you to disappear," she said. He didn't answer. So she added, "But you already survived that once. You don't know the dark anything anymore." But the worst hit came days later. A family Noah had helped, parents of a young boy with anxiety, issued a public statement. "While we appreciate Mr. Bennett's intentions, we no longer feel comfortable with his influence on our child's recovery. We believe professionals should guide that journey." They had never said a word to him before that, never expressed discomfort, never raised concern, but they'd been visited. Someone had whispered, suggested, questioned, and they'd folded. Noah read the statement online, didn't reply, didn't defend himself, but he didn't eat that day, didn't speak for hours, because that boy had once told him, "You talk to me like I'm not broken." And now he might never hear that again. Harold tried to cheer him up. People who can't match your impact will try to reduce your shape until it fits in their frame. Noah gave a small smile. "That's poetic." Harold nodded. "You're not the only one with lines, kid." And still, Noah kept going. He showed up to the garden. He answered calls from students. He checked on the fence line and cleaned the porch steps and wrote in his notebook, even if no one read it anymore. Because that's what you do when your goodness is real. You keep going, even when it's not welcomed. But inside he was tired. Not from work, from the noise, the distortion, The constant battle to prove that his quietness didn't mean he had something to hide. Margaret found him again, this time by the kitchen window, staring out at the driveway. She walked up behind him and said, "I once read about a man who saved a village from a fire. He lost his house in the process, but he said he'd do it again, because not everything that burns is a loss." Noah turned to her, softly. "What if I can't hold it all anymore?" "You're not supposed to," she said. She took his hand. "You're not a wall, Noah. You're a seed. And what you've planted, it's already growing." The storm wouldn't end soon, but he wasn't alone. And this time, the world was watching. Not just the critics, but the kids, the parents, the volunteers, the silent ones who were once like him, waiting for someone to stay when things got messy. And in every quiet act he still performed. He was reminding them, they can try to erase the voice, but they can't erase the evidence. Unraveling never begins with thunder. It starts with something small, a thread, barely visible, tugged gently by someone who's seen enough, someone who can't stay silent anymore. Her name was Monica Triggs, a nurse at Haven Ridge Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, quiet mid-40s, known for her handwritten cards and unshakable coffee schedule. She'd seen the reports, the concerns about Noah Bennett, the clipped footage, the sideways questions. And she knew better, because 6 months earlier, she'd been at the community outreach picnic where Noah helped a 6-year-old boy with motor delays climb a tree for the first time. He didn't touch him, didn't rush him. He just stood below, hands ready, saying, "You've got this. Take your time." The boy reached the first branch and beamed. She never forgot that moment, because no licensed therapist had ever made that boy feel like he belonged in motion. So she logged into a private healthcare forum and wrote, "I've worked in pediatric rehab for 17 years. What I saw that day wasn't reckless. It was rare, and we'd better start asking ourselves why we're so afraid of what's genuine." Her post wasn't long, but it spread fast. Next came Luis Raymond, a janitor at a local school. He'd seen Noah show up after hours to fix a broken bench outside the library. No pay. No permission. He posted a photo of the bench and wrote, "You can't call someone a risk when all they've ever done is repair what others left broken." People started to notice, not just who was speaking, but that these weren't influencers, not publicists, not allies for hire. They were witnesses, people who had nothing to gain and still chose to speak. Then came a student. Her name was Raya, 16, once a runaway, now back in school. She uploaded a raw, unedited video to her social account. Noah had helped her reassemble a busted laptop with parts from 2 old ones she'd found at a thrift store. She recorded the moment it powered on. She didn't say anything in the caption. She just wrote, "He didn't ask what I'd done. He asked what I needed to do next." The video was viewed 40,000 times in a week. Meanwhile, Noah kept moving, kept repairing things no one paid him to fix. Kept checking in on kids who hadn't texted back. He saw the clips, the posts, the shares, but he didn't repost them, didn't bask in the glow. He just kept showing up, because he wasn't doing this to be seen. He was doing it so others could believe they were. But something was shifting. The same systems that once treated him like a question mark now found themselves being questioned. Why were programs failing while an 18-year-old volunteer was succeeding? Why had funding been cut from grassroots projects while Noah worked with no salary? Why had complaints been acted on within days, but testimonies like Monica's were ignored for years? A local journalist, Marla Shore, picked up the thread. She started interviewing people, not politicians, not executives, just people, janitors, cafeteria workers, high school kids, parents, the ones the system called background. She titled her piece, "The Echo They Couldn't Mute: How One Boy's Kindness Shook a Town's Silence." It was long. It wasn't flashy, but it hit like truth. She ended with, "They didn't fear him because he broke rules. They feared him because he reminded them what the rules had stopped protecting." After it was published, something cracked. At the next school board meeting, 3 parents stood to speak. Each had a child Noah had quietly mentored. None of them had planned it. They just showed up. And one mother said through tears, "He didn't teach my son to be better. He taught him he wasn't broken." Then came the internal leaks. Staff from youth organizations sent emails, records of dismissed reports about program neglect, photos of empty offices where teens waited hours for help. They weren't trying to start a scandal. They were trying to say, "You blamed the wrong person." Meanwhile, Margaret stayed steady. She didn't do interviews, didn't write op-eds. She just kept doing what she always did, inviting people in, one by one, over warm tea, over folded letters, over garden paths now cleaned and thriving. And every time someone asked about Noah, she said the same thing. "He didn't save me. He reminded me I wasn't forgotten." And then, finally, someone official spoke. Lisa Connors, the social worker from the original hearing, appeared on a podcast. When asked about the growing conversation around Noah Bennett, she said, "When the system doesn't make room for good people to act, they act anyway. And then we punish them for doing our job better than us. That's what we did to Noah. And we were wrong." It was clipped, shared, reposted. Suddenly, the words "we were wrong" were showing up everywhere. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. There were no court orders, no sudden firings. It was worse. It was the slow, steady collapse of credibility. Institutions once seen as immovable now looked avoidant, fragile, afraid. Meanwhile, Noah still didn't post, still didn't speak on stages, still didn't argue. But every afternoon, at the same hour, he unlocked the garden shed, pulled out his tools, and got to work. Because that was his answer. Consistency. Not to prove the critics wrong, but to prove the believers right. One evening, as the sun dipped below Haven Ridge, Margaret stepped outside. Noah was painting the railing of the porch. She leaned against the doorframe. "They're listening now," she said. "I know," he replied. "Does it feel good?" He paused. Then, "It feels heavier. Like I'm not just carrying my story anymore. I'm carrying all the ones they silenced before me." Margaret nodded. That's what happens when the truth finally breaks through. It brings company. Later that night, Noah opened his notebook. On the last page, he wrote, "When they tried to bury me in doubt, strangers brought shovels and dug me out." He closed it, turned off the lamp, and slept, not peacefully, but fully. Because the system hadn't said sorry yet, but the people had started saying thank you, and that was louder. Collapse didn't come with sirens or headlines. It came like winter frost, quiet, creeping, impossible to ignore once you felt it. The first thing to fall wasn't a building. It was a policy. Just 2 weeks after Marla Shore's article made its second national syndication, Haven Ridge's Youth Services Department issued a statement titled, "Reevaluating Community-Centered Standards of Engagement." Bureaucratic, bland, but buried in the fourth paragraph was this: "We recognize the existing guidelines may have unintentionally discouraged non-traditional advocates from contributing meaningfully to youth development. We are initiating an internal audit." In other words, we built walls around kindness. We're not sure why we did it. Now we have to pretend we didn't. Noah read the release the same way he read everything lately, with caution. He didn't believe in apologies dressed as strategy. But it didn't matter, because something was shifting. He felt it in the way people spoke to him now, less like he was a question, more like a mirror. He felt it in how the teens he worked with walked taller, not because the system changed, but because they had watched someone stand against it and survive. Soon after, the Department of Public Rehabilitation rolled out a pilot program titled Informal Support Recognition Model. Noah's name wasn't in it, but his fingerprints were all over it. Margaret clipped the announcement and folded it into his notebook beside the article by Lisa Connors. "Legacy," she whispered. Noah shrugged. Just paperwork finally catching up to truth. But paperwork wasn't the only thing collapsing. People began to resign. Darla Winters, the rehabilitation consultant who'd spoken against Noah during the town meeting, stepped down, officially, to pursue other ventures. Unofficially, She was called out in a leaked email exchange where she referred to community volunteers as a PR risk with too much sympathy. The resignation trended on local news for exactly 24 hours, then disappeared. But everyone knew, and nobody asked her back. The city councilwoman who had blocked Noah's outreach garden proposal, she voted yes during the resubmission. When asked why she changed her stance, she simply said, "He kept showing up even when we didn't." No one applauded, but everyone understood. More subtle collapses followed. A nonprofit director who once avoided Noah's calls asked to partner on a youth bike repair initiative. A school guidance counselor quietly returned the books he borrowed from Margaret months ago with a handwritten note. "He's doing more for these kids than we did. Thank you for not listening to us." A local pastor invited Noah to speak at a community forum, not from the pulpit, but in the circle. Equal chairs, equal space. Noah said yes, not because he needed the validation, but because the kids he'd help would be there, and he wanted them to see what staying looked like. Meanwhile, the Hale estate became something it was never designed to be. A hub. People came with questions. Not interviews. Not favors. Just simple human things. Do you know anyone who can fix a flat? Do you think this kid would trust me? Would you show me how to keep basil alive in cold weather? Noah always said the same thing. Let's start small. Margaret, watching from her sunroom window, whispered to Francis, "This house used to be my shelter. Now it's become someone else's beginning." Francis nodded. She's not the only one. By early spring, a quiet revolution had settled over Haven Ridge. It didn't wear capes. It didn't chant slogans. It carried tools, wore worn shoes, wrote names in notebooks, and remembered birthdays. They called it the Willow Light Project, named by the kids, not the board. Noah refused to be listed as founder. "It's not mine," he said. "It wouldn't exist without you." They replied. "Exactly," he said, "which means it belongs to everyone who was ignored like I was." The town mayor offered to present Noah with a citation. He declined, not out of anger, but principle. "Fix the benches," he said, "not the plaques." The system hadn't burned. It had wilted. Quietly, because enough people had finally asked the right question. Why did we make compassion so hard to access? One of the last to speak publicly was the boy's father, the same father who had issued a statement withdrawing trust in Noah months earlier, under pressure, under fear. He asked to speak at a Willow Light gathering. Noah didn't want to agree, but Margaret nudged him. "Sometimes the apology isn't for you. It's for the kids watching." Noah said yes. The man stood in front of 40 people, most of them under 20, and said, "I told my son not to trust the boy who helped him, and my son stopped trusting himself. That was my failure, not his." Then he turned to Noah. "I'm sorry. I didn't stand up when I should have. I believed what was easy instead of what was true." Noah didn't hug him, didn't cry. He just nodded. That was enough. Collapse didn't mean the world turned perfect. There were still doubters, still obstacles, still bureaucracy hiding behind, just doing our job. But now, Noah wasn't alone. And when one kid speaks up, it's brave. When 10 speak up, it's movement. When 50 build something together, it's change. At night, when the house was quiet, Noah walked the edge of the garden he'd rebuilt. He looked at the porch where Margaret first handed him tea, at the tool shed where he'd once hidden from attention, at the steps he'd repaired before anyone believed in him, and he whispered to no one in particular. They tried to silence the truth, but it learned how to walk. In the final pages of his notebook, Noah didn't record hours or repairs. He wrote names, first names, last names, kids, volunteers, clerks, janitors, teachers, anyone who had once been unseen and still chose to help. At the very bottom, he wrote, "If I forget why I stayed, these are the ones who remind me." Margaret added one more line beside it in her handwriting. "They didn't come to save you. You reminded them they could still save themselves." It had been a full year since Noah stood outside that bus shelter in the cold, unsure of what would happen next. Since then, he had repaired more than broken fences. He had helped rebuild trust in a town that once refused to look him in the eye. But in all that time, there was still one thing he hadn't faced directly: the people who had once looked away. The ones who crossed the street when they saw Margaret standing alone. The ones who watched a boy sleep in the storeroom and said nothing. The ones who called the system, not because they cared, but because they were afraid of what kindness without control might look like. Now they were coming back, not with sirens, but with silence. The first to return was Mrs. Wilkins, the tenant manager of the apartment Noah had been evicted from. She didn't schedule a meeting. She simply showed up at Harold's store one morning and waited until Noah came in for his usual errands. She looked older, or maybe just heavier with something she'd carried too long. When Noah saw her, he paused. Not cold, just still. "I came to apologize," she said. Noah didn't answer. "I didn't know," she added. He tilted his head. "You didn't ask." She nodded slowly. "I thought if I kept things simple, I wouldn't make mistakes. But ignoring people is a mistake too." Noah looked past her to the shelves. "I don't hate you," he said. She exhaled. "I didn't come for that." "Good," he said, "because I'm not offering it. Not yet." She swallowed hard. "Fair." She left without asking for a handshake. Just left a receipt on the counter, with one line scribbled on the back. If I had looked closer, I would have seen the truth. The second was more difficult. It was Mr. Harris, the father of a boy Noah had helped. The same father who had filed an official concern under pressure months ago, contributing to the smear campaign. He had already apologized once, publicly, but this time he asked to meet privately. No cameras, no witnesses. They sat across from each other on the back porch of the Hale estate, overlooking the overgrown tree line. Mr. Harris didn't wear a suit, just a weather jacket, hands in his lap. "I've had to explain to my son," he began, "why I made the decision I did." Noah waited. "I told him I thought I was protecting him, but really I was protecting myself from discomfort, from change." Noah didn't flinch. "I was scared," Mr. Harris added. "You reminded me that I'd done nothing, that someone else had shown up for my child when I hadn't, and instead of gratitude, I felt shame. So I lashed out." Noah leaned forward. "You thought if you discredited me, the truth wouldn't feel so heavy." Mr. Harris nodded. "But it still does." They sat in silence for a while. Then Noah said, "I'm not here to punish you. I'm just not here to pretend it didn't happen." "That's enough," the man said, and he meant it. Some visits weren't apologies. They were confessions. A schoolteacher came to the garden one morning. She didn't bring flowers. She brought her attendance book, opened it to a list of names marked absent over the years. "Some of these kids," she said, "stopped coming after I didn't believe them, after I called them difficult or disruptive. I thought I was being strict, but I was being lazy and scared." Noah didn't interrupt. "I don't want you to tell me I'm forgiven," she said. "I just want to say it out loud. Somewhere real." He nodded and kept raking the soil. Because reckoning isn't always dialogue. Sometimes it's just making space. Then came Isaiah, the program director who had first invited Noah to the youth center. He hadn't wronged Noah, but he'd stayed quiet when things got hard. He sat beside Noah on a bench one Sunday morning, watching kids race through the field. "I almost cut you off," he said. "I know," Noah replied. "You weren't certified. I was under pressure, and I thought, if I just distanced myself early, no one could blame me." "And they didn't," Noah said. Isaiah laughed bitterly. "No, they just blamed me later for not standing up sooner." Then, quieter, "How did you keep showing up?" Noah thought for a moment, then answered, "Because I knew what it felt like when no one did, and I promised I'd never be that person." Isaiah wiped his eyes. "You weren't." One day, while tending the garden alone, Noah heard footsteps behind him. A soft voice said, "You probably don't remember me." He turned. A young woman, late 20s, clean coat, nervous smile. "I saw you that night," she said, "at the bus stop, with the old woman." He stared, trying to recall. I was in the car across the street, windows up. I saw her there, talking to no one. I remember thinking, someone should help her. But I didn't even unlock my door. Noah said nothing. I've thought about that moment every week for the past year. He looked at her. Come, what do you want from me? He asked. She swallowed hard. Nothing. Just to tell you. Because I think I mistook not hurting someone for being good. But you showed me the difference. Noah nodded. That's why I helped her, he said. Because I saw her and thought, no one else is going to stop. Then he added, now you know what to do next time. She did. She left lighter. Margaret noticed the visits. One afternoon, she looked at Noah across the kitchen table. You haven't said much about them, she said. The visitors? She nodded. The ones who are late. He shrugged. I'm not the one they're here for. She tilted her head. You're not. They're here to face the versions of themselves they abandoned when they didn't help. I'm just the one reminding them. She smiled. You're better at this than most people twice your age. He didn't smile back. I'm not better. I just never had the luxury of forgetting. Some reckonings were quiet. Some were broken apologies, held together by hope. But not all were redemptive. Some people never came back, never admitted what they did, never said the things they knew they should have said. And Noah had to learn to live with that too, because not every story gets closure. But that doesn't mean it didn't matter. The final reckoning came from someone unexpected. Craig, the landlord who had evicted Noah without warning. He showed up at Harold's store one morning, same as the first. He looked thinner, not humble, just worn. He approached Noah as he loaded crates. I heard what you built. Noah didn't turn. You didn't come here for that. Craig nodded. I came because I realized I treated people like inventory. In or out, paid or late. And one of the people I pushed out built something stronger than the buildings I own. Noah looked at him. You want to thank you? Craig shook his head. I want to do better. Then do it. I don't know how. Start where it hurts most. Craig nodded, left without another word. Harold stepped beside Noah as he watched him go. You handled that better than I would have. I'm not handling him, Noah replied. I'm handling who I used to be. Reckoning doesn't always bring resolution. Sometimes it just leaves the ground more honest than it was before. But that's enough. That's where things grow. In his notebook, Noah added one final page, titled simply, They Returned. Under it a list, not of names, but of moments. She said she should have opened the door that night. He admitted silence isn't neutral. They call my kindness a mirror. And then, at the bottom, a line drawn in ink, bold and final. I didn't need their apologies to move forward, but I gave them space to face what they left behind. It started where it had once ended, at the edge of town, 6th and Rowan. The old bus stop was still there, still rusted, still cracked, still stubbornly standing. The bench had new screws in it, ones Noah had added 6 months back. The plexiglass panels were less clouded now, scrubbed clear by a volunteer group that didn't even know who had first called attention to this corner. Noah sat alone in the same spot Margaret Hale had once waited. Same wind, same silence, but the feeling was different now. Not heavy, just full. He didn't come for nostalgia. He came to mark a moment. 1 year. 1 year since he gave up a delivery for a stranger. 1 year since he lost his bed and found his purpose. 1 year since the world quietly said, you don't belong here. And he quietly replied, then I'll build what does. He pulled his notebook from his backpack, not the old one, but a fresh one. First page still blank. He opened it, wrote at the top, this is not a beginning. This is where I pause. He looked up at the street, now brighter than before. Someone across the road waved. He waved back. He didn't know her. He didn't need to. She was part of the same town now. When he didn't feel invisible in anymore. Noah didn't announce he was leaving. He wasn't moving cities, just shifting space. A new team would oversee the Willow Light Garden program, with Margaret as honorary chair. The youth mentorship hub was growing too fast for one person to hold. It needed structure, systems, people who had once been helped, now stepping forward to help others. And that's what Noah wanted. Not to lead forever, just to prove something could last even when he stepped away. He still visited Harold's store every Friday, still sat at the back porch of the Hale house with Francis sometimes, not to talk, just to sit. He still got texts from the kids, still helped fix bikes, still checked fences, but less out of duty now, more out of joy, because when you're no longer surviving every minute, you get to choose how you give. A month before the anniversary, Margaret called him into the study. She had a box in her lap. "I've been saving this," she said. He sat across from her. She opened it slowly. Inside was the first note he'd ever written her. "Noah B., if you ever need help again." And beside it, his original notebook, bound now in leather, its pages preserved like a historical artifact. "I thought you might want this," she said. He opened the cover. Page after page, in his own handwriting. The repairs, the hours, the quotes, the reminders. He smiled. "You kept it all." She nodded. "Because I knew one day you'd forget how much you did." He held it for a moment, then gently closed it. "I don't need it anymore," he said. "I remember now." His last week at the Hale estate, the house was quiet, not with absence, with peace. He didn't pack much, just a coat, a bag, and the second notebook, still mostly blank. Margaret didn't cry. She didn't make it sentimental. She just placed her hands on his shoulders and said, "They will try again. The world. To shrink you. To test you. To remind you of who you were." Then, softer, "But I've seen who you became." He nodded, and for the first time, he believed her. He walked through the estate one last time, past the rooms he once fixed, past the porch he painted, past the kitchen where he'd once learned how to make tea the way Margaret liked it. 2 minutes steeped, 1 teaspoon honey. He didn't say goodbye. He just closed the door behind him. He walked, not in a hurry, not out of need, just walked, through streets that once overlooked him, that now greeted him. He passed the park where he first brought a group of restless teens to plant spinach, past the apartment building where he'd once slept on the steps after being locked out, past the alley where a man named Gus, now sober and working at a diner, once used to sleep, and now sat on a crate, sipping coffee. "Going somewhere?" Gus asked. Noah nodded. "Not far." Gus grinned. "Doesn't matter how far. Just matters that it's yours." Eventually, he stopped walking, at a small plot of land, near the train tracks, unused, unpaved, but full of light. A few garden beds had already been built by kids he'd never even met. He placed his bag down, rolled up his sleeves, began to clear the weeds. He didn't put up a sign, didn't mark it as a project. He just worked, because that's what you do when you've planted something real. You keep tending, even when no one's watching. Back at the bus stop, later that evening, a child passed by with his mother. He looked at the empty bench and asked, "Who fixed this?" The mother smiled. "I don't know." But someone nearby heard, and replied, "A boy, who didn't want anything, except for people to be seen." And that was it. No ceremony, no credits, just a quiet ending in a place that once forgot him, and now wouldn't, because some stories don't end with noise. They end with a bench that holds more than just weight. They end with a garden bed someone else will water. They end when the person who made it possible steps back, so someone else can step forward. Final line, spoken quietly, only to himself, as he leaves the old bus stop one last time. "They tried to erase me, but what I built didn't need their permission to last.